12 states in Nigeria operate a parallel legal system, one that the federal government has never formally abolished, never fully endorsed, and never seriously confronted in over 2 decades. Peter Obi ran for president on a platform of restructuring, accountability, and national unity. He won the hearts of millions of young Nigerians across every region, North and South, Muslim and Christian. But here's the question nobody in the mainstream press is sitting down to ask seriously. If Peter Obi had become president, or if he wins in the future, what does he actually do about Sharia law in 12 northern states? Does he touch it? Does he leave it alone? And if he leaves it alone, what does that mean for the Nigeria he promised to fix? Because the answer is not simple, and the answer tells you everything about whether any Nigerian president can truly unify this country, or whether they are just managing a contradiction. Stay with me. Before we go deeper, if you're just finding Naija News feed, welcome. This channel exists to break down what's really happening in Nigerian politics without the noise, without the spin. Hit subscribe and stay with me because this one gets interesting. Let's set the foundation because a lot of people have feelings about this topic without knowing the actual facts. In the year 2000, Zamfara State became the first Nigerian state to formally reintroduce Sharia as a full legal code, not just for personal matters like marriage and inheritance, which had always existed in the north under customary law, but as a full criminal code. Punishments including amputation, flogging, and the death penalty for certain offenses became part of the official legal framework. By 2002, 11 more states had followed: Kano, Katsina, Niger, Bauchi, Kebbi, Sokoto, Jigawa, Yobe, Borno, Gombe, and Kaduna, though Kaduna and a few others implemented partial versions. This happened under President Olusegun Obasanjo, a Christian Yoruba man, and here's what's critical. Obasanjo did not abolish it. He made noise, but he did not act. Why? We'll come to that. Now, why is this relevant today in the context of Peter Obi? Because in 2023, Peter Obi ran the most serious third-party presidential campaign Nigeria had seen in a generation. He won the presidential election in the eyes of millions of Nigerians. The courts disagreed, and that's a separate video. But his candidacy forced a conversation. Could a Southeast Christian govern a country where 12 northern states operate Islamic criminal law? And what would governance even look like? This is not a hypothetical anymore. Obi is still politically active. The 2027 election is building up, and this question has never been properly answered. But before we get to Obi specifically, you need to understand the institution at the heart of this, because without that, none of his options make sense. Here's where it gets legally interesting, and where most commentators get it wrong. The Nigerian Constitution, Section 10, states clearly, the government of the federation or of a state shall not adopt any religion as state religion. Nigeria is a constitutionally secular state. So how are 12 states running Sharia criminal courts? The answer lies in Section 277 and Section 279 of the Constitution, which provide for Sharia courts of appeal in states where they existed before the Constitution. This was a compromise baked into the 1999 Constitution, the same Constitution that Abdul Salami Abubakar's transitional government handed over. The Sharia criminal codes that were introduced in 2000 went beyond what the Constitution contemplated. Constitutional lawyers have long argued they are illegal, but here's the gray area. No case challenging the full criminal Sharia codes has ever been decisively resolved by the Supreme Court. Challenges have been filed, sidestepped, and quietly buried. The federal executive, the president, has no direct power to unilaterally repeal state laws. That's a matter for state assemblies. What the president can do is direct the Attorney General to mount a constitutional challenge at the Supreme Court, withhold federal allocation under political pressure, legally dubious, but it's been threatened, use the bully pulpit, apply political force without legal force, do nothing, which, as we'll see, is what every president has essentially done. And there's one more institution you need to know: the Supreme Council for Sharia in Nigeria, a powerful religious body with significant influence over northern political elites. Any president who moves against Sharia isn't just fighting governments, they are fighting that body and the traditional emirate system behind it. Here's what surprises most people: the strongest opposition to Sharia expansion in the north hasn't always come from the south. Some of the loudest critics have been northern Muslims themselves. We'll come back to that. This is the heart of the video. Focus here. Let's start with Peter Obi's public record on this issue. Obi, during his campaigns, was careful, strategically careful, about how he addressed Sharia. He spoke consistently about the rule of law, constitutional governance, and one Nigeria under one legal framework. But he never, in any major speech or interview, said the words, "I will abolish Sharia criminal law in the north." Why not? Is it cowardice? Is it pragmatism? Or is it something more calculated? Let's think about it the way a strategist would. Who benefits from the status quo? First, northern political elites, the emirs, the governors, the senators from those 12 states. Sharia is not just a religious system for them, it's a political identity tool. It signals to their base, we protect Islamic values here. It's a mobilization mechanism. A governor who defends Sharia gets votes. A governor who questions it gets primary challenges. Second, the Nigerian political establishment as a whole. Every president since Obasanjo has found that Sharia is a useful pressure valve. If the North is agitated about something else, fuel subsidy removal, federal appointments, military operations against banditry, what do? You don't touch Sharia. You let it sit there. It keeps setting elites on side. Third, external religious networks. There are documented connections between some Nigerian Sharia advocacy groups and Gulf-based Islamic charitable organizations. This is not conspiracy. This is fundraising reality. Those financial flows give certain actors an interest in keeping the legal framework alive. Who stands to lose? First, non-Muslim minorities in the 12 states. Christians, animists, and others in places like Kaduna, Bauchi, and Niger State live under a legal framework that technically doesn't apply to them, but in practice bleeds into their daily lives through enforcement culture, social pressure, and the absence of neutral civic institutions. Second, northern women. Sharia criminal codes in their current application have been used disproportionately against women. The famous cases, Safia Husseini, Amina Lawal, where women were sentenced to death by stoning for adultery, these cases became international stories. Both sentences were eventually overturned, but the legal architecture that produced those sentences still exists. Third, northern reformers and progressives. There is a significant and often overlooked constituency in northern Nigeria: educated, urbanized Muslims who are deeply uncomfortable with criminal Sharia and want modernization. These people exist, they vote, but they are politically outgunned by the religious establishment. The Obi calculation. What are his actual options? If Peter Obi becomes president, he has 4 realistic paths. Path 1. The constitutional challenge route. Direct the Attorney General to file a formal Supreme Court challenge to Sharia criminal codes as unconstitutional under Section 10. This is the cleanest legal route. It's also the most politically explosive. The North would read it as a declaration of war. His administration would be consumed by the conflict from day one. He would lose any chance of a governing coalition. Path 2. The Federalism Plus approach. Don't touch Sharia directly. Instead, strengthen federal institutions, the courts, the police, civil registries, in a way that gradually makes the parallel Sharia system less powerful. Fund legal aid organizations, appoint reformist judges, play the long game. This is quiet, structural, and doesn't make headlines. It's also what people mean when they say institutional reform. Obi's Labour Party platform leans closer to this than anything else. Path 3. The National Dialogue Route. Convene a national constitutional conference, something Nigerians have been calling for since the 1990s, and put every contentious issue on the table,
including Sharia. Let Nigerians negotiate a new social contract, kick the decision to a legitimate representative process. Smart, but risky. Constitutional conferences in Nigeria have a history of producing reports that gather dust, and a president can be seen as weak for outsourcing the decision. Path 4. Strategic silence. Don't address it at all. Focus on the economy, security, and anti-corruption. Govern effectively in ways that don't require confronting Sharia head-on. Hope that economic progress makes the issue less politically charged over time. This is essentially what every president has done. And here's the uncomfortable truth. It has partially worked in the sense that Sharia has not caused a formal constitutional crisis, but it has also allowed the situation to calcify. I'm going to come back to something before the end of this video, because there's a scenario that almost nobody is talking about, where Sharia actually becomes less politically important, not because anyone abolishes it, but because of something entirely different. Stay with me. Now, if what I just laid out surprises you, drop a comment below. I want to know your take before we get to the part that changes the whole picture. Let's zoom out. What does this mean for Nigeria as a whole? The federal-state power balance. Nigeria's current structure gives enormous autonomy to states. This is a legacy of the military era and the compromises of 1999. A president who moves aggressively on Sharia isn't just fighting religion, he's fighting the entire logic of Nigerian federalism as it has been practiced. If an Obi administration successfully challenges Sharia through the courts, it sets a precedent. The federal government can intervene in state legal structures. That precedent terrifies every governor, not just northern ones. Southern governors with their own legal irregularities and constitutional gray areas would also feel threatened. Economic consequences. Investment in the 12 Sharia states is already complicated by perceptions of instability and legal unpredictability. International businesses, especially in financial services, hospitality, and consumer goods, apply informal caution. A protracted federal-state legal battle over Sharia would deepen that uncertainty and likely slow investment in the north for years. Ironically, an Obi administration that doesn't tackle Sharia but successfully grows the economy may do more to secularize northern public life than any legal challenge. As northern youth employment improves, as education rates rise, as urbanization accelerates, the political demand for criminal Sharia tends to decrease. Economic development is the long-term solvent. Interfaith and inter-ethnic relations. Nigeria has experienced some of its worst interfaith violence in the Sharia states, particularly Kaduna, which has seen repeated cycles of Muslim-Christian communal violence. The Sharia question is not just abstract law, it is woven into land disputes, residency rights, business licensing, and access to justice in ways that affect daily life. An Obi presidency that is seen as hostile to Islam would almost certainly accelerate tension in those flashpoint areas. An Obi presidency that is seen as governing fairly, appointing northerners, investing in northern infrastructure, taking security seriously, could potentially reduce tension even without touching the legal codes. In 2002, Obasanjo reportedly told a northern governor privately, "If I challenge Sharia in court, the north burns." That calculation, right or wrong, has shaped every president since. Obi would inherit the same calculation.
This section matters because international pressure is one of the tools in the presidential toolkit. The United States and UK. Both the US State Department and the UK Foreign Office have flagged Nigeria's religious freedom situation in annual reports for over 2 decades. Nigeria has been listed on the US Commission on International Religious Freedom's watch list. This creates a diplomatic lever. American and British governments can apply quiet pressure, particularly on issues affecting Christian minorities in the north. However, and this is important, neither the US nor UK has ever made Sharia reform a condition of military aid, trade agreements, or diplomatic engagement with Nigeria. Oil, security cooperation against Boko Haram, and counter-terrorism have always outweighed religious freedom concerns in the hierarchy of Western interests. An Obi administration that wanted international support for reform would find sympathetic ears, but no cavalry. The OIC factor. Nigeria is a member of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which itself is politically contentious in Nigeria since it was joined by a military government without full national debate. Any Obi move against Sharia would be framed by opponents not just as anti-Northern but as anti-Muslim at the global level. The OIC membership gives Northern advocates an international platform to frame the issue. What diaspora Nigerians should know. Many Nigerians in the UK and US have a simplified view of this issue. Either Sharia is barbaric, Obi should abolish it, or Sharia is a religious right, leave it alone. The reality is far more layered. The question is not whether Sharia should exist as a personal religious practice. That's not in dispute. The question is whether a criminal justice system with corporal punishment can coexist with constitutional democracy and the rule of law. That's a governance question, not a religious one. Let's deal with the things people get wrong. Misconception number 1. Obi is too Christian to handle this fairly. This is lazy analysis. Obi's actual record as Anambra governor was notably free of ethno-religious bias in appointment and governance. His running mate in 2023 was Yusuf Datti Baba Ahmed, a northern Muslim. The ticket was deliberately constructed to signal cross-regional governance. Dismissing Obi's capacity on religious grounds without examining his record is the same intellectual laziness that has kept Nigeria's political conversation shallow. Misconception number 2. Sharia is just a northern Muslim issue. It doesn't affect everyone. Wrong. Nigeria's inability to unify its legal framework is a direct drag on investment, on federal cohesion, and on the country's international reputation. When businesses assess Nigeria risk, legal fragmentation is a line item. When the military struggles to operate across states with different legal cultures, that has security implications. This is a national governance issue dressed in religious clothing. Misconception number 3. The best approach is a direct constitutional challenge. Just take it to court. The strongest counter-argument here is practical, not ideological. Nigeria's Supreme Court is not insulated from political pressure. A case challenging Sharia criminal codes would take years, it would consume enormous political capital, and there's genuine constitutional ambiguity, as we discussed earlier, that means the outcome is not guaranteed. You could win the battle and lose the war if the North responds by further entrenching parallel institutions outside formal legal structures. The strongest opposing argument. The most intellectually serious argument for leaving Sharia alone is this. In a genuinely federal system, states should have the right to govern according to the values of their populations. Northern Muslims did not ask to be part of a country with a secular legal tradition. They were amalgamated into Nigeria by British colonial fiat in 1914. Demanding that they abandon a legal system rooted in their religious identity is, from this view, a form of continued cultural imposition. Where does that argument fall apart? It falls apart when the system is applied to non-Muslims. It falls apart when it is used to oppress women within Muslim communities in ways those women themselves reject. And it falls apart when it is used by political elites to deflect accountability, hiding behind religious identity to avoid the question of why northern states, with Sharia in place for 25 years, remain the poorest and least developed in the country. Here's the irony nobody talks about. In several Sharia states, the governors who most loudly defend Islamic law have been convicted of or credibly accused of massive financial corruption. Sharia prescribes harsh penalties for theft, but the politicians looting state treasuries are not the ones getting their hands cut off.
So, where does this go from here? Most likely moves. If Peter Obi contests 2027, watch for him to sharpen his language on constitutional supremacy and the rule of law, framing Sharia not as an attack on religion, but as an accountability issue. His most likely approach in office would be Path 2, structural federalism reform, judicial strengthening, and economic investment in the North, without a direct legal confrontation.
Watch the Labour Party's northern strategy. If they begin building serious networks in Kano, Kaduna, and Katsina beyond the 2023 obedient base, that tells you they believe the northern Muslim middle-class vote is winnable, and that requires not making Sharia a flashpoint. Signals that things are escalating. Be concerned if you see new Sharia-related prosecutions of high-profile cases getting international attention, Southern politicians making Sharia a campaign weapon in 2027, or any constitutional crisis triggered by a federal-state legal conflict in the Sharia belt. Also watch if northern reformist voices, academics, lawyers, young professionals begin more openly challenging Sharia criminal codes from within their communities. That internal debate is the most important one, and it's currently being suppressed but not extinguished. Best case scenario: an Obi or any reformist presidency that prioritizes northern economic development, education, and security. Over 10 to 15 years, as northern states develop, the political class that uses Sharia as a mobilization tool loses its grip. Reform comes from within, as it did in countries like Indonesia and Turkey, where economic development gradually shifted the political center of gravity. Worst-case scenario: a presidency that either triggers a constitutional crisis over Sharia and loses, setting back the reform cause for a generation, or one that is so silent on the issue that Sharia criminal codes become even more entrenched as a permanent, unchallengeable feature of Nigerian life, deepening the country's internal legal fracture. Earlier, I mentioned a scenario where Sharia becomes less politically important, not because anyone abolishes it, but because of something else entirely. Here it is. If oil revenue collapses, and there are serious projections that suggest it will, as global energy transition accelerates, the federal government loses the money that has always been used to buy northern elite compliance with the status quo. When the money dries up, the political settlements that have kept Sharia intact may not survive. Reform may come not from a president's courage, but from a balance sheet. We opened with a simple question. What would Peter Obi actually do about Sharia law as president? Here's the honest answer. He would not abolish it through a frontal assault, because no Nigerian president can do that unilaterally, and any president who tried would likely fail. What he could do, and what his record and platform suggest he would do, is pursue constitutional governance, strengthen federal institutions, and invest in northern development in ways that slowly starve the political conditions that keep Sharia criminal codes in place. Is that enough? That depends on your timeline and your theory of change. But here's what I want you to hold on to. The Sharia question in Nigeria is not primarily a religious question. It is a governance question. It is about who holds power, how they justify it, and who pays the price when they abuse it. Until Nigeria produces leaders at federal and state level who are willing to be accountable to the law regardless of religion, region, or patron, no legal framework, Sharia or secular, will deliver justice to ordinary Nigerians. That's the real story, and it's bigger than Peter Obi. It's bigger than Sharia. It's the story of whether Nigeria can become a state that actually governs. What do you think? Is structural reform enough, or does someone need to take the direct route? Drop your take in the comments. I want to know where you stand. If this breakdown gave you clarity on what's really going on, do me a favor. Share it with one person who needs to understand this. Like the video, subscribe to Nigerian Newsfeed, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.